Everyone. Great to have you here. This morning we have Sue Crockett with us, and Sue is the executive director of the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. She's been involved with Employee Ownership Association, I think, for about 30 years. She was the executive director of the Minnesota School Business Officials Association for, I think, around 18 years, and is now executive director of the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. So she's been doing some presentations around the state to get the word out as our demographics change, that there are some opportunities to set up businesses in a little different form than maybe some think about, or instead of a sale. So with that, Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce your guests. And I am going to take my video off because I have low bandwidth this morning. So With that, Sue, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I guess let me make sure, am I sharing? Oh,
yep, you're sharing.
You are sharing.
Okay, oh, there we are. So I just want to add that even though I did 30 years with the ESOP Association and 18 with the School Business Association, they were simultaneously. They were. I haven't been around that long, but yes, I have spent 30 years as the chapter executive for the Minnesota, Dakotas, and Pennsylvania, Delaware chapters of the ESOP Association. So I've been in the employee ownership world for a very long time. And in January of 2020, I became the executive director of the Minnesota Center. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the center after I introduce our speakers. But I also want to say to everyone attending that we really want to make this interactive. So we're happy to entertain your questions. Natalie's going to monitor the chat room. And we will pause every so often too for questions, but we do want to be able to answer those questions for you. And we are going to do more of an overview today of the different options, but we would love to go deeper on any one of them with you in the future. So let me introduce our speakers. So Toni Kildow is ESI Equity, and she's the managing partner and vice president at ESI Equity, and has been instrumental in the work with the ESOP with our other speaker, Peter Schuller, with AB Systems. And like I said, we are going to create a PDF of this, so you'll have their detailed information on their backgrounds as well, and feel free to ask questions of them as they're speaking. So, Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership, who are we? We were created by the Employee Ownership Expansion Network to really be the boots on the ground. Hello? Oh, someone asking something?
I think someone is unmuted.
Okay.
I'll go in and mute.
Okay, good. Anyway, so there was always that middle ground or middle road was not really being attended to as far as just being an educational vehicle for different forms of employee ownership. And so we started in January 2020, became a 501c3. And then in March, of course, of that year, the COVID hit and made for an interesting year. But we made a lot of progress in being able to connect with different people and different organizations across the state to just kind of introduce ourselves, to know that we're here as a resource for professionals, for business owners, to start to prepare for the future. We aren't membership driven, so we are free and an unbiased source of information. And we're supported financially by the professionals and the companies that support the philosophy that every employee should have wealth equity. So our mission is to turn the state of Minnesota into a place where every working person can also be an employee owner. There are 53,000 businesses in Minnesota that are owned by people over the age of 55. And we won't call them boomers, but that's what they are. And they probably will be exiting their business in the next 3 to 5 years. and many of them do not have a plan. And many of them do not even know what their options are. So we want to, instead of just selling out and maybe just a company buying their assets or they close the door, we want them to know that there are other options to explore, to benefit themselves as an owner and also to benefit the employees and keep businesses in their communities and in Minnesota. So here's where I'm going to be very brave, and I'm going to stop sharing and go back into another, here we go. So I wanted to show, this is an interactive map that we have on our website that here shows the total of the businesses in the state and how that affects our state financially. The different businesses are listed here. But when I go into, and I'm going to go into Olmsted County, so you can see when I click into this, it tells me, no, it's not. There we go. So in Olmsted County, there's 1,000 businesses with owners over the age of 55. And here you can see what it is that the businesses are across here throughout the county. So this is really a very powerful tool that's available to anyone through our website to show the impact of those businesses and the future in those communities. So we want to be able to ensure that people have enough information to make those decisions, and for the state and counties to work with us in that way too, so that we all are in this together. So now I'll go back. So today, we're going to be talking about employee stock ownership plan, which is an ESOP, and basically a retirement plan. But I want to touch a little bit on the other options that we talk to people about. One being worker cooperatives and the other one being employee ownership trusts. A worker cooperative is good for a company that might be smaller and not have the revenue or the value built up in it to be an ESOP. But the employees still are benefiting from the ownership, and they are benefiting while they work there. And an EOT is similar to an ESOP in that the employees are benefiting from the company doing well, but again, it's while they work there. So there's the ESOP is a retirement plan. The other two could be along the order of more profit sharing, but the employees are also benefiting from it. And the owner is still getting fair market value for selling their company to a worker cooperative or a trust. And happy to go into that at another time in another session or with anyone individually if they'd like to talk more about that. But today we're going to focus on ESOPs. So I'm going to turn it over to Toni and to start that portion of it.
All right. Well, thanks, Sue. As mentioned, my name is Toni Kildow, and I'm with ESI Equity, which is a valuation firm. As a valuation firm, our primary focus is on the valuation of both existing ESOPs and those companies that are in the process of considering installing an ESOP. Personally, I've been doing valuation work for over 16 years. I've seen many successful ESOPs through the various economic conditions that we've had over that time period, including the very unpredictable and unusual last 18 months that we've had. ESOPs, I think, have a special character to them that allow them a different kind of mojo, if you will, to be able to get through some of those unpredictable or uncertain times. By definition, an ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan. That's what the letters stand for. It means it's a trust, and that trust is holds shares of an operating company, either in whole, 100% of the company, or in part, as well as holding cash. An ESOP is governed by ERISA because it is a qualified defined contribution retirement plan. So it's much like a 401k or a profit sharing plan. So it does have ERISA DOL aspects to it. So it does have a formal plan around it, but it is a means in which a company ownership can be held. I think more importantly, beyond the legal and the technical aspects of it, A company with an ESOP tends to have a culture to it, an employee ownership culture. It kind of is a completely different way of thinking, a different way of acting. Employees through the trust obviously are benefits of the stock itself. But again, it usually, not always, but usually transitions into a culture or a way of thinking of how the business operates, where its focus points are. So with that, I think we'll go to the next slide. What are the benefits of an ESOP? And so why this slide has a bunch of bullets on it, I just want to talk through some of these items. So the benefits of an ESOP, one is flexibility. So when a business owner has made a decision to start to explore and possibly has looked into an ESOP and thinks that maybe that's a viable option for them, it can be a single stage, meaning if the company can sell 100% at once, or it can do it in stages, where it sells a portion of the business at one point in time, and then it either sells the rest of it at another, or it can do it in multiple stages. Pete will share a story after in just a few slides where his company, and he has a partial ESOP ownership. Both a partial ESOP as well as 100% ESOP have their series of advantages or disadvantages, but either is a very viable option and both can carry some of the same benefits. I think the next two items that are important to hit on are probably a little bit more common more recently. One is legacy. A lot of business owners feel that they have a legacy that they want to leave, or they want the culture that they have built up over the years to stay with the company. Many times if you sell to a competitor or you sell to private equity, those things are destroyed quite quickly. You know, they'll wipe out the management team or completely change the focus of the company. So for many business owners, having that legacy is an important reason why an ESOP is considered. Another point is staying local. And again, this is one of those things I think is a hot topic for many, that being able to keep a company local, being able to keep its employees local, an ESOP provides that opportunity of a succession plan, but allows that legacy and local aspects to stay with the company. Any type of sale, no matter how you would proceed in succession planning, can be disruptive. However, an ESOP, once the ESOP has been installed, generally is the least disruptive of all options of sale, only because the least amount of things have changed instantly. The company continues to operate similar to how it has. Sometimes the people haven't changed. The board may have some change in with it over the next year, or there might be some different processes that are put in place over the next year, but it isn't like a night and day change. Whereas if you have a completely different ownership structure that's moved in. So again, keeping that business consistent with what it had been. And an ESOP also has that, as I mentioned earlier, that culture, that empowerment concept to it. So it tends to have the ability to increase productivity, an increase on revenue focus, profitability focus, etc. So it just tends to have some real aspects to it for benefits, either in keeping it local or keeping your employees, and maybe even growing the business a little bit faster. So with that, we'll go to the power of an ESOP. Next slide. And this slide has a bunch of statistics on it. And again, I think Sue's going to send out the slides, so I won't necessarily read the statistics, but again, just going over, employee engagement tends to bring about higher sales and higher revenues, tends to have more focus on profitability. Obviously, management is always focused on profitability, but it tends to expand that to the employee base of everyone thinking about the profits of the company, because it's the concept of shared wealth that as an ESOP culture sort of takes hold, that focus on profit is something that everybody can somewhat relate to. It tends to reduce turnover because there's this carrot of an enhanced retirement benefit that's out there. It just tends to keep people there, and employee retention is a key point, which I think Pete will touch on later through his story. And ESOPs in general tend to have a good focus on wages, because as you build up that culture, you want to keep those people and you want to build that culture. So wages tend to certainly be at market rates, but sometimes even a little bit higher, because you're really building a machine, if you will, where everybody has this ownership type thought process. An ESOP can be the one of, or in some cases, the only retirement vehicle that an employee may have. In some cases, the ESOP can be enhancement to an already established program, such as a 401k. Statistics would say that in some ESOP companies, over non-ESOP companies, retirement benefits can be as much as double. Don't know if that's the norm, but it can be in some ways. There tends to be more focus on succession planning, as well as building employees. So again, as you build your culture and your employees, you want to keep those employees, train them and grow them. And that tends to have that natural succession planning already built up within the company. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there are certain tax benefits that ESOPs bring with them, especially if you're 100% S Corp. This is a case where the trust holds the stock of the company, and the trust itself is a non-tax paying entity. Tax can be a very complicated item, but the ESOP does have a tax benefit with it. So next slide. Can an ESOP be an option for a company, or how does that process work? So this is going to be kind of an oversimplification of it, but just to sort of give a high-level review. If a business owner were looking at, could an ESOP work for me, or at least what are the options? There are sell-side advisors that help business owners to explore their options, ESOPs being one of them. They generally are able to lay out multiple aspects to input dollars to them, and also help with that tax planning option. What do those look like for the business owner, as well as or the selling shareholder, as well as the ESOP itself? So you're able to quantify some of those differences. Should an owner decide that they want to proceed down the ESOP path, an independent ESOP trustee is generally appointed to the ESOP. At least in today's world, your transactions are done with an independent trustee. And the reason for that, as I mentioned early on, ESOPs are governed by the Department of Labor. It's an ERISA plan. And because there's this oversight, if you will, there is a processes in place to try to make sure that the ESOP has fair representation from the beginning. So an ESOP trustee represents the ESOP itself and negotiates with the selling shareholder to try to come to terms, both price and terms, of what the deal may look like to sell the company. I know, Sue, you mentioned in the different options, fair market value. ESOPs too also tend to be at fair market value as well, but some of those other aspects that I mentioned with keeping it local and legacy also tend to play into the whole concept. The process for an ESOP installation can range anywhere from 3 months to 8 months, just depending on there's a lot of variables that play into it, including how is financing involved, how many attorneys get involved in the process. But generally speaking, I would say that we see a lot of ESOPs that get installed in 3 months once a decision has been made that that's a viable option for a business. So before we let Pete kind of tell his story of how ESOPs fit into his business, I'll pause there if there are any questions.
Toni, I don't see any in the chat, but it's a small group. So if anybody has a question, please just unmute and ask it.
You know, the one thing I will add here that I think sometimes comes up when you say employee owned, like, what does that mean? You know, the employees, they don't really own the company. I mean, they're not running the company. There still is a management team in place. That management team is still making the decisions. So I wanted to make sure to make that point, because I think sometimes that throws people off when it's like the employee ownership and what do they have to do to buy it? Well, in an ESOP, they don't do anything. they just are given this stock when it's sold. So it's a pretty easy way to build a retirement nest egg. Are we ready to move on then?
Yes,
Yeah.
so go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. So let me introduce Peter from AB Systems down in your neck of the woods. And Peter, just go ahead and start your stories and let me know when you want me to change. Good morning. Go for it.
I'm Pete Schuller. Glad to participate in this webinar today, and hopefully we can convey some helpful information. And if anyone wants to contact me after the webinar or at a future date, please feel free to do so. So with that, let's see, what's the next slide? AB Systems is a design, build, construction company. So we perform architectural engineering and construction services. My brother and I founded the company in 1972. We were both shortly out of college, no net worth. So in order to start our company, my background is business and economics. We did a 5-year plan. Found that neither one of us had any net worth and not enough money to start a company. So my parents co-signed for my brother, my mother-in-law co-signed for me, and we felt we still didn't have enough money. So we went to outsiders and we actually sold stock to outside shareholders. So we finally had enough money to start the company. Then we had to pick a location. My brother was working for a construction company in Minneapolis, and I was working for Standard Oil. And he asked me if I wanted to get into the construction business with him. And so long story short, we both quit our jobs, formed the company. We did market research. Where do we locate? Rochester, Mankato, Owatonna. We picked Rochester. So we founded the company in 1972. In 1975, we put an office into Mankato and then a warehouse in Waseca. In 1979, we were looking for 2-3 acres to build our own office building. And we happened to buy a cornfield in Rochester, southeast Rochester, which consisted of 75 acres. So then we got into the development business where we ended up actually selling land, property, and buildings. In 1998, my brother, who was older, was nearing or was planning on retirement. So we looked at the options of what do we do with our company once we decide to sell. Neither one of us had any children that wanted to get into the business. So we looked at, do we sell to another construction company? Do we sell to a developer? Do we sell to a capital of interest? Or maybe we ought to pursue an ESOP. So we ended up with an ESOP for several reasons. Number one, there was a concern for the employees. Toni mentioned earlier culture. We wanted to maintain the culture that we had established. Also, we wanted to make sure that the employees have a savings plan. And obviously, there are some huge tax benefits for the sellers, for us. On a 1042 exchange, you don't pay money on the capital gains. And so that was a big incentive for us as well. So at that time, we had the laws were such that you had to do a 30% spin-off. So we ended up spinning off 30%. In other words, we purchased 30% of my brother's shares. And then in 2000, we bought the rest of the 20%. So he and I own 50% of the company. The ESOP now owns 49%, and I kept 51% of the company. And then with that, then I guess, let's see, what's the next slide? The story, yeah, funding then. I think Toni mentioned earlier in terms of the return on investment, we've done quite well over the years. Usually our stock valuation goes up, as much or greater than the stock market. And so that's been a real successful way to participate. In terms of exit plan, because we are a C corporation right now, we pay income tax. Once I sell the rest of the shares, the company should change to an S corporation because of the tax benefits that are allowed for an ESOP. But we've been fortunate enough. So one of the things that we do right now when we have a good year, and we've had some really good years in the past here, we've put enough money away then to fund my buyout and the future employees that retire. So every year we determine how much can we put away, and luckily, we've got enough, in savings right now in the ESOP plan for the company to actually buy my shares, without having to borrow any money. But anyway, so we're in a good position there. So what is the next slide? Yeah, that's just our company, and you can take a look at that, what we do in-house, our capabilities, and what we have done over the past. Next slide. Customers. We've been relatively successful. McNeilus Steel is one of our larger customers in Dodge Center. We've built about 1 million square feet for them. We've done work for Pepsi-Cola, Hormel, FedEx. Biocon is our largest account, Owatonna. It's a glass company for whom we've built 1.5 million square feet of buildings. So we've got some well-known clients under our belt. Next slide. Tribal knowledge being an ESOP. Number one is that our customers and most potential clients feel that an ESOP company or employee stock ownership company is a more conscientious company because everybody has a stake in it. So we're finding that to be the case. And of course, we advertise that we're an ESOP company, employee stock ownership, and our employees are concerned about what they do now and what they do in the future. Along with that, it's created employee loyalty within our company. There's less of a tendency for employees to look elsewhere. And just on the stock that each individual gains, in some cases, that's like $5 to $6 per hour. You still need to be, competitive wage-wise with the rest of the industry, but we feel that most of our employees are a little better paid than the typical industry construction employee. We find that we have a fleet of vehicles. Our employees tend to take better care of them since now they own, part of the vehicles. We find that the employees are better mentors for the newer employees because of the ownership. The other factor for us is there's less tendency for unionization. At one point in the 80s, outsiders tried to come in to unionize their company, and that was defeated, partially because of the ESOP participation. The S Corp versus the C Corp, there's, obviously great tax benefits by doing that. But when one converts, it's almost, I need to sell the rest of the shares, and then it becomes more viable to make it an S Corp instead of a C Corp. And there are some other, tax benefits and consequences with that. The 1042 exchange is a big benefit for the seller. So when I sell the rest of my shares, I have to reinvest that in a in a trust, which has to be U.S. Stocks and bonds. It can't be foreign. Need to retain that for at least a year without selling any of the stock. And then at that point, you can start to sell it off or you want to keep it. But if that is large enough, at some point, you probably never will touch that trust at all. You should be able to live just on the interest that earns each year. So I think that is the tribal knowledge. How about the next slide?
Pete?
Yeah.
Actually, so can we go back just one slide real quick?
Sure.
Pete, you mentioned a little bit on retaining employees, but in today's world, getting employees is quite the challenge just because of the different labor items that are going on. Can you talk a little bit about how your ESOP is a marketing aspect in terms of being able to attract new employees to your firm?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have probably a smaller turnover than most construction companies just because of the ownership. And what we found now, we've got some employees, at least 60% of our employees have been with us for over 15 years. So the longevity is probably greater than most companies. And what we have found, at least the last few years, the longer term employees, and most of those are superintendents, they now are preaching, to the rest of the choir, how much they have in there. So, many of our superintendents, they don't have education greater than high school. But some of those people between the 401k and the ESOP, some of those people are approaching in excess of $1 million. So what we find then is when we are hiring, even outside our field crew, our construction managers that are doing that hiring, they're actually telling these people, hey, this is what we have. This is what I've got in my account. And it's a big incentive for somebody to come to work for the company. So what we find sometimes the younger group, sometimes they'd rather buy another new vehicle or a motorcycle or whatever. But as they get the ESOP stock built up, there's then that tendency to want to put it away. So it's a huge incentive, as Toni mentioned earlier, to both hire employees and to maintain them.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Is a new ESOP, it is somewhat elusive. It's hard for the general employee base to sort of grasp the concept of what kind of benefit an ESOP actually brings to the table. But the longer that you have an ESOP, it sort of builds its own steam, if you will. And the more that employees actually see that there's real money to be had there upon retirement, it just sort of snowballs, and employees see the power of it, and then they become more engaged and thinking about growing the company, both from a revenue standpoint as well as a profitability standpoint. Like Pete had said, just that how they take care of their vehicles may be substantially different when they know that any dollar that's spent on maintenance could be coming out of their stock price. So it kind of becomes a self-motivating, if you will. Yeah,
and with that, they actually become better mentors for the younger group. We find that having an ESOP, was the best way for us to exit, and we think that is the way to go with all the options that we had in terms of selling the business. I guess, the last statement there.
Sorry.
One of the things too is when we started our company, one of my goals, was actually to set my own culture. I worked for, one of the largest companies in the world when I first got out of college, and I saw what that was like. And I thought that I wanted to set my own culture in terms of morality, in terms of, whatever we want to do. And that was one of the incentives of starting our own company, is you can set that culture. And then obviously, if you want that culture to continue, you need to preach that during your employment there. And then I find that our company has developed that culture, and it's a culture that you want to perpetuate.
Is there, before we move on and kind of give you our contact information, were there any other questions you have for Toni or for Peter or for me? I'd be happy to chat. Toni, maybe let's just take a moment and talk about what are the first steps when someone says, okay, I want to sell my company to my employees. I want to be able to create wealth equity for all our workers. I want my legacy. I want to stay in my community. What are the first steps they should take?
Networking, I think, is a big one, is finding other companies that have put an ESOP in, and kind of what's the tribal knowledge that they share. And then finding a set of professionals, I think, is key. Especially in today's world, whether it's you have to find a sell-side advisor that can start to put together some numbers for you to be able to go through what your options are, looking at finding that independent outside ESOP trustee is another key point. And the trustee then in turn hires a valuation firm such as myself, and that begins the negotiation process. So it is a team to be able to install an ESOP. And like I said, it does, typically you wouldn't see it done in under 3 months, but if you have the right team in place, you kind of get some momentum there. But the first step really is, I would say, exploring options and making sure that you've explored personally what you're looking to get from the company, what you're looking to leave behind in the company, and kind of exploring the numbers portion of it, and then finding the right professionals to move forward.
And that was a beautiful way to segue into what the Center for Employee Ownership does, is that we help business owners and the advisors who advise them to get those resources, those contacts, those professionals. Let us help you do that. It's your one stop where you don't have to go out and try to do it all on your own. At MNCEO, we have lots of great ESOP stories like Peter's that we're willing to share. Our website is up there. There's a lot of recordings of different webinars we've done with ESOP companies and professionals. There's a lot of FAQs, like what is this? What's an ESOP? What's a worker cooperative? What's an EOT? So we really just want to leave you with that we are a great resource for you as you move forward and start thinking about your options. Here's the contact information for Peter and Toni. As Peter said, more than willing for you to reach out to either one of them just to talk. Everything we offer at MNCEO is free for consultation. And so don't hesitate to reach out to Peter or Toni or to myself. So we'll give you one last chance if you have any questions before we close.
I think I'll just bring up one last point. While I mentioned that an ESOP can be installed in 3 months, usually the exploration time is much greater than that. So as Sue talked about how many business owners are over, I forget which age you mentioned, was it
55?
65?
Mm-hmm.
55?
Mm-hmm.
That is the one thing that I will say that I see, is that sometimes people wait too long. They didn't take the proper amount of time to be able to explore their different options, so they may feel rushed. You never know when medical events may happen. You never know, or like Pete had said, he's doing some funding for it. So it gives you time to prepare financially for different options. So I guess that would be my kind of parting advice, is that regardless of what path you go on, making sure you have enough time to be able to explore the different options and know the benefits and the costs and what things you can be doing early on in order to have the best result down the line.
Yeah, excellent, excellent closing to that. Thank you, Toni. And thank you, Natalie, for having us today and for everyone who's joined. Appreciate it. We will be sending out the PDF of the presentation. And then I believe Natalie's been recording this, so we will have that available as well to you. And I thank you and wish you a lovely Friday. It's a beautiful day in Minnesota, so go and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue, Toni, and Peter. I have a couple companies I know I'll be sharing the PowerPoint and the recording with, knowing that they're looking at how to exit. So I think that is probably true of everyone that's on this call. So again, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you joining us here in Southeast and advising about some of the options. Have a great Friday afternoon.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to those that are staying on for our economic development professionals meeting, we'll move to that agenda here in just a moment. And I don't know if people, I'm going to stop recording now so that